Okay, can you settle down into this session, please? We've got 3/4 of an hour to change the face of housing delivery. So settle in. So welcome back. It was really interesting to be part of yesterday's session. I'm Mike Diat from HTA Design, and I'm really proud and pleased to be chairing this session, which for me already has started. The conversation that was happening in the corner is exactly what you might hope by getting together people who can influence, commission and deliver the homes we need. And we certainly need it. I think that what we heard yesterday, those who were around yesterday, is the scale of the problem that we have. I, in my panel session, mentioned 1 in 23 children in homeless accommodation. I was quickly told, no, it's 1 in 21 now. How quickly all of that moves. And the other takeaway yesterday was Tom Copley. In my preparation for this, I had counted about 3,000 social housing starts in London, and Tom said 15,000. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because as far as I could find, the numbers are far lower than that, because in some ways the context for this discussion is that we need to deliver far more homes than we have in the past, but actually probably more than we're currently tasked to deliver. London is tasked with 88,000, which is actually a reduction in terms of housing delivery for affordable housing, and I think that's come down from 35,000 to something like 28,000 a year by 2029. So we're in a place where actually the targets for London have actually dropped. The demand is almost too much to imagine, and the exhibition is a fantastic exhibition to show what people have to live in temporary accommodation, hotel accommodation, and so on. So I'm really delighted to have with me a panel of people. I think between them can solve a great part of what it's going to take to deliver the homes we need. And the collaboration, the title of this session is Aggregation, a collaboration, small sites and MMC. So basically bringing together the ingredients that we see in our cities. So to my left I have Kieran Williams, the leader of Southwark Council. And Kieran, interestingly, has reached out to other local authorities to collaborate on housing delivery. I'm interested in hearing more of that. And also is planning a site programme in the near future, and it'd be interested to hear more about that. And then Deborah Heenan, Chief Executive of Populo. Deborah, really innovative thinker about housing, and our former government advisor, Prime Minister's advisor as well. And then Joanne Drew. Joanne Drew is the lead for housing in Enfield, lead director for housing in Enfield, and a mind-boggling number of projects, really. As an innovative council, absolutely phenomenal amount of direct delivery in Enfield. And then Stuart Marshall from Elements Europe. Elements are a modular manufacturer with a system that can build in cities to the standards we need in London. So I'm really, really pleased to have the panel with me. And looking forward to engaging with you in the audience. I was going to ask for a bit of a show of hands about who was from where, but actually I think the more value will be in you asking questions from the panel as we get to that part of the session. So I have a question, and it's a question for all the panel members and to answer in turn. I'm going to start with Stuart, but the question is this. What does good collaboration look like for you? What do you need to make collaboration in housing delivery work for you? Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Morning, everyone, or afternoon as it is now. Changed hours. Yeah, for us, it's really important. I've been in MMC for over 20 years now. Been with Elements for 7 years. So we've seen the wave of MMC come and go, and all the false promises and non-delivery. So, you know, we've experienced it, but where we found it works extremely well, quite similar to I was in the session before this about collaboration is partnerships working together. But the reality is for us, yes, we do need volume, we need pipeline, but we need something that's more of a standardised item that we can all work to. If everyone gave Elements all the work that they had, we couldn't fulfil it. And we know that if you took all the modular manufacturers in the UK, put them together and gave them everything that's required, we couldn't fulfil it. So there has to be a realism about what we can deliver and how we deliver it. And I think having something that's a standard product doesn't have to be bland, but it has to be something that everyone agrees to. Where we've seen it in the past, where we've worked with other local authorities, housing associations, everyone wanted something that was unique to them, which meant there was no standardisation, which meant there was no volume, and that means there's no pipeline. We then end up looking at opportunities that people come to us. Yeah, we want to use MMC. We've got a garage site for 8 units. Can you do it? Now, from a manufacturing facility that can do a couple of thousand homes a year, that really doesn't work within our framework. But if you've got more of a standardised approach, for us, good collaboration isn't just about the MMC company working with the local authority. It's about the local authorities coming together to work together and having more of a joined up thinking. Where we've seen it in the past, we've had frameworks that have been put together and they've never really joined up the thinking between everyone. And I think we're all super focused on having a solution, but I don't see much collaboration of everyone sitting around the table to try and say, right, what can we all do? Where can we get the quick wins to standardise products, to make it more cost effective? It's not just about the manufacturing, it's also about bringing the cost down by standardisation. So for us, it's choosing those relationships and those partnerships and having that good, close, open discussion.
You mentioned the holy grail there of bringing the cost down. Which is always one of those things that comes every time you talk about off-site manufacture. Everyone believes it's cheaper, and it could be one day, but starting off, it needs a bit more of a commitment to longer-term pipelines, I think. So, Joanne, if you'd like to pick up the theme.
Yeah, from a local authority perspective, I think the first thing to say is that councils have a massive commitment to building new homes, and we are equipped with our teams in place to do that. We have been on a number of collaborative journeys in the past, and the extent to which the economy has affected delivery of those, I think has some large part in why they haven't necessarily delivered at the time and in the way that we thought we would. So I think the issue around collaboration is not to think about vehicles and structures. It is to think about joint thinking and how we can work together and learn together. It is about getting upstream, I think. So we were talking earlier about how can we create government conditions to support local authorities to venture into this area and incentivise us through financial means, both through ensuring that our housing revenue accounts are viable in the long term, that our funding settlement for local government that's under review at the moment incentivises us to build rather than rewards us through the new homes bonus after we've built. We need the money up front. So I think there's some things that government can do at a strategic level to create those conditions. I think there's also things that we can do working collaboratively with the marketplace to understand how to access most effectively. We've had a buyers club, North London boroughs, where we did a pattern book, which was really high quality and really successful, but we just couldn't get the schemes together as a buyers club to then go to the market with an offer. Partly this issue about local government governance. We've got strict rules about how we procure, how we contract. So we really do need to ensure that we've got confidence of our supply chain and that we've got quick routes to get into delivery, but perhaps that enable every local authority to operate as a sovereign borough, if you like. But I definitely think we, London Council's housing directors, we have a group of development experts across the capital, and we work regularly to look at areas of common interest. And I think this could be a fantastic one to explore further. So I think it's definitely something that we will be interested in, and we just need to think creatively in terms of how this could be part of the government's agenda for accelerating delivery and getting those 400,000 new homes that London needs by the next Parliament.
So, Joanne, I think the impressive thing is seeing Enfield close up, as HTA and I have the privilege of doing. It's really interesting to see how innovative, I think it's right to say, local authorities are with a very difficult delivery environment, and how much risk actually local authorities are prepared to take to deliver. And actually, you mentioned the Buyers Club, and we'll certainly come back to it. But just to say, one of the things Tom Copley said yesterday, he signalled out that as something that he had hoped could work. And I think that the fact it hasn't worked means it might still be there to resurrect. And I think you were the early adopter on that.
We were the lead borough.
Lead borough. So innovation is right there in the thinking. So on that theme, Deborah.
So, if I just look at the gentleman on the panel here and look round the audience, you'll see a selection of very lovely jackets that you're wearing. I've got a lovely blue one here. I've got some fine wool. Did any of you go to Savile Row and get your suit handmade, or did you buy your jacket off the peg? Off the peg?
Yep.
Are they all identical and boring? No, they're suit jackets. I'm saying, you know, within the realms of, would you say that you could buy a really cheap one from, yeah, and you can buy an expensive one, but they come in some standard sizes. So 300 years ago, you wouldn't have bought them off the peg. You would have got a tailor to make them, and that was bloody expensive, which is why very few people could access those clothes. They've come massively down in price. It didn't happen overnight. But what's the fundamental? The fundamental is there are some standard sizes and protocols that means those things can be made in a production. Now, what if we said, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new guild of men's jackets tailoring across each of 300 local planning authorities, and they're all going to pass the standard of whether that jacket is good or not, and they're going to have a view of the colour of the jacket before you can pass it through. What do you think is going to happen to the price of your jacket? Okay, so I mean, it sets out, and we've translated this onto much more complex automotive. But there's a reason why there's a standard chassis that the automotive industry understands, but we don't see, because we're buying that crucial badge of the Audi or the Leon, but it's the same car in its guts underneath. And that's telling us something about how bonkers the system is, which is just reinforcing the argument here. But for me, the crux of it is you wouldn't have 300 car manufacturer regulators across 300 boroughs. You wouldn't have the same for even the tailors' guilds. So if we're going to deliver homes quickly and we're going to drive down the price, we need to standardise some basic things. It doesn't prevent you going to a Savile Row tailor if you have the money and the appetite, but it does, for the vast majority of the population, drive down the price and enable people to access desperately needed homes. So that's from the conversation just prior and the conversations going on with government, that's where we think we need to get to and get there fast.
So Deborah, but within Newham, how many homes would you be looking to deliver each year? What of those sorts of chassis types?
So we have some that are very city urban, and they would be a bit more bespoke, but there are a lot of infill sites, so you're into the thousands, and the vast majority of homes delivery in this country is going to be in much more suburban areas. Two things to say about that. It lends itself really well to standards, because the homes that we most love are delivered by the Georgian Victorians. We don't really like what was called before the wimpification of the countryside, those wiggly layouts, because they don't lend themselves to walkable neighbourhoods. So the very happy coincidence, if you start standardising terraces and you can get the right density, you need it for the planet, you also need it for the economy of the land take and to create walkable neighbourhoods, and that is going to be the vast majority of delivery is going to be low rise.
I think that's quite true. I think in London you can see the challenges that we have in housing delivery at the moment, which is largely about buildings over 5 and 6 stories. And you know, I think that we're going to have a bit of a hiatus this year, in particular, as that's coming through. And I think there's some solutions there that Offsite can offer, but we'll come on to that. But Kieran, from your perspective, where you sit as the leader of a local authority, I think you're the largest stock-owning authority in London. Yeah. I think that's right. And obviously, like all of you, dealing with the pressures of homelessness and so on, and the difficulties of dealing with finance and all those sorts of really difficult things, and the hope that the government are going to be bringing in a more beneficial environment. But you have actively reached out to others, so I'm interested in what's the provenance.
So I thought I'd touch on 3 things. I'm going to go back to the things you were saying at the beginning, Mike, about why does this matter so much right now. Say something about why I think we found it so hard to collaborate across authorities, housing associations and others to address the problem over recent years, and why I'm optimistic though about the future. And I'll talk about the collaboration in amongst that. You know, to go back to that point, so right now in London, 1 in 21 children, it's probably more than that actually, because that figure was from a few months ago now, and the numbers are going up so fast, living in temporary accommodation. So that's more than 1 in every classroom. In my borough, we've now got a waiting list of 18,000 households, not people, households, for a social rent home, council or housing association. That's gone up by 7,000 since before the pandemic. So the housing need is just so acute. And that's people at the end who are really struggling. We know the reality is, for people right across all aspects of society, housing is just drifting out of reach. You know, the average cost across the whole of the UK, buying a home has gone from 4 times average earnings, just I think 5 years ago, to over 8 times now. That's a disaster for all of us in the long term, for people in this room, for our children, for everyone, and we've got to turn that around. And why has so much of it been so difficult? I mean, the short answer is, in this country, as with much of the rest of the world, let's be clear, we've just had this boom and bust approach to house building. And also in this country, we've stepped back from the state building at scale. And that means that the private sector has done its thing in the UK of delivering somewhere between roughly 100,000 and 200,000 homes a year, and depending on whether we're in or out of recession, and it's just not enough. Centre for Cities reckon that the UK needs another 4 million homes to meet the need and to have the relative number of homes to residents that most European countries have. It's a huge gap to fill. And what's all that about? It's just, I'd say behind it is a lack of certainty. And over the last decade in particular, we've seen certainty destroyed. So we saw funding for affordable housing cut back. We saw the social landlords, councils and housing associations very rightly have to pivot from thinking about new homes, particularly housing associations who are building at scale and councils who were starting to investing in existing homes to meet higher standards post-Grenfell, post the death of Arab Ishaq. And all of those things just pull things around in the system. And it means that trying to buy into a contract with a provider who wants a steady flow of 2,000 homes a year on a particular model just doesn't work for everyone, because we're all away from that certainty. The optimism, though, is actually the national debate has suddenly surged forward, I think. So you've got a government committed to building a moonshot target of homes, 1.5 million homes. You've got a national consciousness that is really clear that actually housing is one of the biggest issues in the country. Despite the scale of the crisis, it's not really been that case, that's housing at the top of the agenda. You've got a government that's ticking off all of these reforms. You know, they're working through additional funding for social homes, announced yesterday. They're working through rent policy for social landlords. They're working through planning reform. So all of that energy is there, and I think a government that's clearly, flagged its, what's the phrase? Anyway, yes, the mast, that's the one. Flag on the mast, it's a big thing that they're going to be held to account for. And that allows us to have a period, I think, of some much more certainty. And we've got to grab hold of that certainty and use that certainty to do the things we can do together. Which is why we were talking beforehand with some of us about, well, okay, there are councils and housing associations across the country who have land that they're thinking of bringing forward in right now to build homes on. There is a real opportunity to do that together, and not all of it, but some of it can be about modular build on those sites, across a range of sites, at scale, with a particular approach to planning and a particular approach to procurement. We can do those things, I think, now in a way that is different. And just to finish what you actually asked me, so the work I've done around council housing in particular is bringing together a coalition of 107 councils to agree a long-term plan to put council housing in particular back on firm financial foundations. And why has that been possible? Because councils across the country are facing the same challenges, and whether you're in London or Sheffield or Manchester or a little district council somewhere, people have seen that actually it's the same challenges. And actually, I thought it would be really difficult to build a coalition and get councils to agree on a set of specific asks of government, a set of specific proposals on how we take things forwards. It was easy. Well, it wasn't that easy, but it was it was much easier than I thought it was going to be, because people see the commonality across political parties, across the country. So I think the territory's there to do it, but we've got to find those opportunities and we've got to base it on long-term certainty.
Isn't that, it's just to hear the four speakers, it just feels to me like there's an opportunity to lean in to the environment that the government has created. And I just want to reflect on something I said yesterday. We're in a position, I've not seen this in my career pretty much, where you have every Secretary of State to a person talking about housing. You have the Prime Minister talking about housing. You have the Chancellor talking about housing. It's a remarkable place. And then you have them doubling down on that 1.5 million homes. And I think, Kevin, you're right to mention that. You've got a government that's it's not just a flag, is it? They've built their whole electoral future success on delivering 1.5 million homes. We sort of know that they won't, don't we? But that doesn't matter, because actually it galvanises us. I think that's the thing. We are now galvanised by a government that's going to be in power for at least 4 years, that we have to do something. And the milestone that's coming up, which is why I think Jez and the Housing Festival have timed this event perfectly, is in July, which as Lord Best noted, is late spring or is spring. Now, in July, we will have a long-term housing strategy. Gosh, who would have thought? We'll have a comprehensive spending review, locks into housing, an industrial strategy that now mentions housing. It didn't originally, actually, but now housing is at the heart of it, it would seem. And, these things are really important, I think, for the psyche of not just the country, but all of us that are tasked with delivering these homes. I mentioned earlier that I'm now a granddad. And, I think you all need to understand this, that I now look at my grandson in the same way as when I was having conversations 20, 30 years ago about my housing for my children. It's now moved on to my grandson, and I'm looking at my career and thinking, what have I been involved in for 40 years here, not building the homes for my own kids, let alone everyone else's? So having a grandson puts it in a new framework. It's actually, this shift that we've got hasn't happened before in my career. If we don't grab the advantage of now and doing something which is different, we'll miss it probably for another generation. And actually, You just don't know what the outcomes are of not dealing with this issue, which even Treasury is now accepting the fantastic reports that are out there about the value of investment in housing. That fantastic session yesterday with the health people, Dr. Williams and so on, who were saying that if you're living in temporary accommodation through your childhood, it impacts your whole life because of the physiology of being in an environment which isn't supportive to you. So we have locked in all those kids that are in temporary accommodation are going to be suffering the consequences of that for the rest of their lives. And society, too, will be having to support them because of the consequences of basically the lack of investment in homes. So we've got this great opportunity. So what's stopping us? What do you think will be the barriers that stop all this energy that we have to do things differently? Joanne, you're looking at me, so I'm going to look at you.
So in terms of, I think what's interesting is in our work at London Councils, we've been collaborating with MHCLG and the GLA on what will it take to deliver at the increased pace required. And we've done the maths, and basically it means the end-to-end planning process being twice as quick as it currently is, 4 times more planning applications in the planning system than there currently is, and 1.3 times quicker construction times. And all that's got to be in place by 2027. So I really agree with Mike that what the target gives us is a fantastic catalyst to look differently and to understand that that means fundamental system change. It's not just about the planning teams and whether they've got enough capacity. It's about the whole system, the statutory consultation process, the 2-tier system in London, and all of those things, and whether we're using AI effectively upstream. So it unlocks, when you look at what you need to do, it unlocks the mind to think really differently and boldly. So I think that's fantastic. And I think the MMC kind of solution certainly plays into that need as part of the system to get more rapid construction times. It absolutely does. That said, viability is the issue for everyone in the development field at the moment. So we know we need more grant. We know that government is doing all it can to push more money out for house building. We know the GLA is working with MHCLG to try and get more flexibilities in how we use that to make schemes more viable. So we do need good prices on MMC. We need that so that we can commit and be certain about what we're committing to and that we know we can deliver. So I think there are challenges. There's always challenges in development, isn't there? There's no scheme that's easy to deliver, but there are lots of opportunities at the moment to think differently, and all parts of the system really need to come together to make that work.
A whole system approach.
Yeah.
Is one of the things.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to start with something that Mike said earlier as well. I've been in the industry, as I said earlier, over 20 years. And like you, I feel like I failed. We haven't delivered what we tried to deliver as an organisation, as off-site manufacturers. We seem to always seem to hit the barrier. I think, again, we're in a position here where listening to the conversation which is encouraging about collaboration, the one missing piece from that is there also needs to be collaboration between the manufacturers. We all talk about collaboration between the end user, the client side, but nobody's ever sat me down and said, let's set up a task force of all different manufacturers with different systems. They don't all have to be in the room, but how can we work together as a set of manufacturers to work with you? And having that sort of collaborative approach from the MMC industry and working with the local authorities, housing associations together as a task force, I think would unlock a lot more than people would realise. So you have an opportunity there, not just to collaborate from your side, but for us to collaborate from the manufacturing side as well, which again unlocks technology, unlocks the way forward, which we all want to bring costs down. That, for me, the target is to make sure that we've got, increase our quality. The quality's got to be number one, but ultimately we want to be economically sensible. You know, we want to provide good quality accommodation at a reasonable price.
So just going to go back to this target again. So 1.5 million homes. So, why such a big target? And I think the thinking that sits behind that, I don't know how many people in the room have heard of Mariana Mazzucato, economist based in London up at UCL, writes about mission-driven public service and takes lots of thinking from all sorts of things, NASA space program, the moonshot phrase. You set yourself a really big, really clear thing that everybody can get behind. And when I say everyone, it could be a researcher in a university, it could be a business, it could be a bit of public institution. You can get behind, how can I help do that thing? And you provide long-term certainty. That's the thing you've got to do. So the government have done that. And then it kind of falls back on all of us to work out, well, how can we help make that happen? What can we do differently? And also, what can they do? It's the other thing I'll come back to. You have a government that's come in with its list, as governments do. This is the stuff we're going to tick off, so that we're going to do planning reform, we're going to do right to buy reform, we're going to put some more money into the system, we're going to have a reform private renting, all of those things. That list will end quite soon. And then they'll be coming back, well, what do we do next to deliver the things we've got to deliver? And one of those, on this discussion, has got to be a really clear proposal about how do we as a country have government-backed house building at scale as one part of the programme. There'll always be private, entirely driven, but what's the government-backed, large-scale programme? And I guess that's what we've got to collectively, in this room, on this panel, come back with a proposal on. Here is a government-backed scheme. And we can assure you, government, that if you back this scheme, whatever it looks like, that you'll get good value for money, that they'll actually be built, they'll be in the right place, that we won't all fall out with each other and we'll agree to get on with it and we'll put sites of land forward. And we'll only be able to do that if the government, on the other hand, can say, well, we can assure you that will be money for X number of years. Not all the money, some of it's going to come from sales and other things. So I think that's the bit that we need to work through. And the reason, as Joanne was saying earlier and others, the reason why I don't think we've been able to do that up to now is there's just not been the certainty. There's no point collaborating if you don't know how much money you're going to have in a year and 2 years' time, if you don't know what resource how much you're going to borrow. So there's got to be some certainty in the system. And the only people who can provide certainty at that scale is the government. That's what governments are for.
So, Deborah, just before we go to audience questions, so I'm looking at all of you. I'll be picking on you if you don't put your hands up. I have to tell you. Deborah, just your thoughts before we go to...
So when we got set up in 2018, it was fairly straightforward. If you want to build some homes, you need the land, you need to create a viable scheme that's got planning permission, then you need to build the stuff, and the stuff needs to be worth more than what it cost you to build it. Pretty straightforward. And Newham worked really hard through political and officer leadership and gave us a land bank of 10,000 homes. First 1,000, we've built them. It's been steady because land there, got a development team set up. We're cross-subsidising the PRS with the affordable. And now, apart from estates regen that is viable because it's in a high-value area, the Carpenter's estate is viable. We can deliver that and it's fine. Other sites are struggling because policy has changed. There's policy inflation, borrowing inflation, and build cost inflation. But what do we need to do? We need to do what every other production line in the last 50 years has done, which is drive down the production cost. And we have collaborated with colleagues in British Land, Mark Farmer and others, and we reckon that if you drive the build cost down by 20%, we're fully back in business. So that brings us full circle to, we've got the answer. The public sector is the largest land banker in this country. It is not the volumetric builders. It is us as the public sector. We need to standardise so that manufacturers, whether you do it traditionally or you do mass manufacturing, you need to bring that cost base down by 20%, and then we're all back in business. So for me, it circles back to we've got everything solved, barring sorting out the regulatory meets the manufacturer so you can do the mass production, and 20% pushing down. Again, if you looked at telecoms, cars, suit jackets, the cost has come down by way more than 20%. 20% is not that much of a stretch.
A great point to finish on there. So opening up to the audience then. Do we have any questions, please? Gentleman there. No microphone.
Hi, my name is Wayne Smith. I'm from a Cat 2 manufacturer called SIPCO. I won't say the borough, but we're in the process of aggregating a delivery of 38 units over 6 sites under the Hidden Home Scheme, so you probably guess which borough that's under. My sort of thoughts on this are the frameworks that are in place, like you said, the governance and the framework to deliver that procurement, and a lot of the cost gets lost in there. We've been quite lucky that pilots can be set up to mitigate the delivery partners within that. What are your thoughts around opening up that sort of scheme to people that are more able to deliver modern methods of construction and standardise, saying that this particular scheme has 12 different types of unit on it in 38 units? So standardisation is fantastic there, isn't it?
So procurement, frameworks and procurement, often very expensive things to bid for, and often manufacturers are not best placed to bid for them. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, keep coming back to this. So we've procured over £300 million worth of construction. Could we do it again, that 20% efficiency? We could for us and the suppliers. Again, sort of back to, if you know there's a standard thing that you're coming in to bid to build. You know, there's one house builder that I used to work for, and they sent out the time and motion men. Of the guys on site, on an average day that should have been 7.5 hours, only 4 hours was productive, because every day is a new surprise of a different product. So again, it circles back to standardisation, unlocking everything else.
Any other questions? At the back there?
Hello, Lucy Robson. I'm not sure what you mean by buyers club. Is that a good or a bad thing? And where would the standardisation you're talking about, where would that sit?
Yeah, so the Buyers Club that we created in North London was a partnership, loose partnership, so there was no contract or vehicle, but an agreement that we would bring forward a number of schemes from our AHP programme to deliver through the MMC route, and that we would do that through a pattern book that was developed in order to kind of give the market our requirements. In the end, that was just as the economy was taking a dip, we got a fantastic pattern book. All our schemes became challenging to deliver, and we were seeing that MMC wasn't as certain as we would like it to be in the marketplace, and we just couldn't get together with a programme collectively that we could go out to the market for, because of the volatility that we were facing in our programmes generally. So I think in a more certain time that we seem to be venturing into now, aside from the viability challenges we have, there is the scope to do that, but the procurement then is left at the local level, and there are still aspects about the conditions to create that supply chain that aren't in place. So I think it still needs more government buy-in and support for a broader strategy, and certainly up front more planning policy that creates the conditions for boroughs to operate in a more similar way, so that each of the schemes isn't progressed through different routes, which makes it hard for the provider, the supplier at the end, to adapt to different borough requirements, as Deborah said. So a lot of these things seem great in concept, and they are, but it's the right time, isn't it, I think? But what it shows is that there is an ability to create the right conditions, and I just think we need to get our heads together a bit more, along with the marketplace, to see how we can make that work.
The point on standardisation, because we talk about standardisation as if it's a thing. Of course, it's just.
So let me give you a firm example. So of the 1,000 homes we've built, Most of them were on large sites and apartments, so that's all about efficiency around lift cores. But there were several that were low-rise, and they were terraced houses. But what we inherited, and it happens mostly with small startup developers, there was a different architect who came on board, and we've looked back at 5 different sets of terraces that are all different, but slightly different. To the people who moved in, and a lot of them literally cried when they moved in from where they'd been to move into those homes. They did not care that some were 4.5 metres wide, some were 4.3 metres wide. They were all terraces. They're all the inheritors of the Victorians' Met Accordia. You know, they've all got triple glazing, but aside from that, they all look pretty much like the Victorian terrace that they were set amongst. Why on earth did we spend so much money designing a very slightly different variation? Now, if you're on one street and you decide for a slightly more buff brick compared to a render, that has very little impact on the cost. It's like the car, the bumpers can change, the colour can change, but if the guts of the house is the same, you know it performs to EPC A. You know that you're always ordering from Nordan or Valfac the same dimensions of windows. Then you don't end up with a graveyard of misordered windows, etc., etc. So just driving that efficiency. Again, it means that the guys who had a productivity of 4 hours on site per day, they know that when they get to site every morning at 7:30 and have their cup of tea, they know they're going to build the same guts of the same thing. They know that it's the same struts, it's the same bathrooms. It just drives so much efficiency through the entire system.
I suppose it's just the common design just underlines the need for us all to be working out how we do this together. So think about my own programme. So in Southwark, we've last year hit started on site our 3,000th council home. And if I think about what those homes are, there's a huge variation. So we've got hidden homes. We've got one site's got 581 council homes on one site. We've got small terraces, which are an infill, 3 or 4 homes between each other. You can't have one design for all of those. You can't have one core for all of those. They're totally different concepts. But of course, if you look across London or across the country, of course we've got sites that look pretty much identical. Our small garage site, the same as boroughs across the city have and beyond, hidden homes that others will have. And in fact, many of those hidden homes will be in exactly the same architecture block built by London Council back when it was one planning authority, housing authority for the whole of the city in exactly the same block. So some of it is for us to step back and look at how we do those things across a set of programmes. And again, I'm just going to go back to why am I optimistic that we could do this now? I just think we've got a lot more certainty for the next few years than we've had previously. So the chance to actually think about those things that we can do together is real in a way that it just hasn't been over the last decade.
Stella, one more.
Thank you. Hello. Stella Antoniades, I'm from Hammersmith and Fulham Council. I'm lead member of land development, but I'm also an architect. So this is marrying the two, I suppose. I think standardisation could be a very good thing with the economy of scale that we need. And as you've all touched on, we have varying sites in London. Some boroughs have more capacity than others. Hammersmith and Fulham is very tight. We don't have a lot of space. I really love the idea of collaborating. But with the architect's hat on, I agree we have mass production. We have to meet these needs, but we also need to maintain quality and good design, because we all know that it impacts everybody on their well-being, and it has other knock-on effects with health and longevity of people. So my question is, I suppose, and I know there's some councils that have this already, like how do we maybe get a standard borough architecture department in? It doesn't have to be a big team, but, to actually monitor this quality. And I'm just wondering if there are councils that have set something like this up already, but again, it would come as part of this bigger framework that we are looking at with the government and local authorities together?
Yeah,
So, I'm glad you asked that question because I thought it was going to be a difficult conversation with architects that we work with. And no, Alex Ely in May won the Sterling Prize, built some beautiful later living for us. LDA Design did all the landscaping for the Olympic Park and for the carpenters. They've come together with Richard Partington, Met Workshop. They all violently agree that if you set standards for the chassis, what's underneath, you actually drive up quality because you're driving certainty, and then you can have that variety, but it doesn't, it's separating out that back to the cars, you know, there's as Kieran saying, it's not one product everywhere. So there's a chassis for the Volkswagen chassis is the Audi, the Volkswagen, the Seat. If you go up, there's an SUV one, which is scarily, there's £100,000 difference between whether you want a badge that says Lamborghini or a badge that says Audi 8. You will pay £100,000 for some leather interior and some dashboard and a shiny badge, but it's the same car underneath when you get up to the SUV. So there will be different chassis, but that's where you drive, and especially with the Building Safety Act, if you're building the same thing, you have much, much more control over the quality standard.
Thank you.
So I think violent agreement is a great place to finish. I'd just like to say just one thing. There's one of the other words in the title for this session is absorption. Absorption, I put in there because it's a sort of technical term about the rate that you can occupy homes. That's people. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about housing people. And I think that in terms of all the agendas the government have, we have to create an environment in which people can thrive and grow and live good lives. And I think what we've heard today is an ambition to do that. So I'm hopeful that this is not the first time that this conversation will happen. It has happened several times over these last 2 days. And I'm looking forward to continuing that discussion. So please can you thank my wonderful panel. And please do come up and talk to them. If you think that you've got something that can help, get in touch with Jez Sweetland or Jessie or Ellen. You know, we are here to have a conversation, a dialogue, and to stitch things together so that the government lays down the gauntlet. We've done what you've asked industry. Now you've got to deliver. And I think that it's down to us to fill in that space. So thank you all very much.